"Grandma, we're going. Now," he blurted after looking at my basement. I thought I knew my children. The old house stood at the end of a narrow road, just as it always had. Its paint was faded, the wooden gate creaked when moved, and the garden had grown a little wild over the years. Still, it was home. The grandmother had lived there alone since her husband passed away many years earlier. Every room carried memories, and every corner felt familiar and safe to her. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. That morning, she woke up earlier than usual. She moved slowly, as her knees often reminded her of her age. She washed her face, brushed her hair, and put on a clean dress she saved for family days. She had been waiting for this visit. Her children had called the night before, saying they would come by with their kids. Nothing special, just a normal visit. Still, it made her heart feel light. She went into the kitchen and put water on the stove. The kettle had a small dent on one side, but it worked fine. As the water warmed, she wiped the counter and set out cups. She liked things neat when her family came over. It made her feel proud, like she was still taking care of everyone in her own way. The smell of tea soon filled the kitchen. She smiled softly and looked around. The same table. The same chairs. The same window that looked out to the garden. She had raised her children in this house. They had laughed, argued, cried, and grown up here. To her, this place held nothing but warmth. By mid-morning, she heard a car pull up outside. Her heart lifted. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked toward the door. Before she could open it, the doorbell rang. She laughed quietly to herself. Some things never changed. When she opened the door, her children stood there with their kids beside them. Bags in their hands, smiles on their faces. They greeted her warmly. Hugs were exchanged, though a little careful on her part. The children rushed past her, excited to explore the house they had visited many times before. Come in," she said, stepping aside. They filled the house with noise right away. Shoes were taken off. Jackets were placed on chairs. The children talked over each other, sharing stories from school. One of them laughed loudly, another ran toward the living room. The grandmother stood near the door for a moment, watching them all. It felt good. Full. Alive. They moved into the kitchen together. She poured tea while her children sat at the table. The kids grabbed snacks from a bowl she had set out earlier. Small talk flowed easily. They talked about traffic, work, school, and the weather. Nothing serious. Nothing heavy. She listened more than she spoke, nodding along, smiling when expected. This was how it always was. She liked hearing their voices mixed together, even when they spoke at the same time. It reminded her that she was not alone, even if the house was quiet most days. One of her children asked how she had been feeling. She said she was fine. That was mostly true. Some days were harder than others, but today was a good day. She did not want to worry them. The kids finished their snacks and asked if they could go play. She told them they could, just like always. They ran off toward the back of the house, their footsteps loud against the old floor. The grandmother watched them go, smiling. Her children continued talking. One spoke about work stress. Another mentioned bills and plans. The grandmother sipped her tea slowly. She felt content just being there with them. She believed she knew them well. After all, she had raised them. There were no secrets between them. At least, that is what she thought. As the visit went on, the house felt warm, both in sound and feeling. Laughter came from the other room as the kids played. The adults shared stories from the past, remembering funny moments from childhood. The grandmother laughed along, her eyes shining. At one point, she got up to bring out more snacks. She moved carefully, holding on to the counter for balance. One of her children offered to help, but she waved it off. She liked doing these things herself. It made her feel useful. When she returned to the table, she noticed nothing out of place. Everything felt normal. Too normal to question. The house, her family, the moment, it all felt safe. After some time, one of the children asked if they could explore the basement. The grandmother paused for just a second. The basement was old and dusty, filled with boxes from years ago. But it wasn't dangerous. She had nothing to hide. Just be careful, she said. And don't make a mess. They agreed and ran off, their voices fading as they went downstairs. The grandmother returned to her seat. Her children continued talking, unaware of anything unusual. She leaned back slightly and let out a quiet breath. She felt happy, grateful. In her mind, this was exactly how life should be. Family together. No trouble. No fear. She had no idea that this simple visit, which felt so normal, was slowly moving towards something she never expected. At that moment, though, she only felt peace. And peace, she believed, would last. The house stayed full of sound, and the grandmother sat there, calm and sure, believing she knew her family completely, and believing nothing in her home could ever disturb them. The talk in the kitchen continued without any rush. Cups were refilled, plates were pushed aside, and the sound of the house felt calm and familiar. The grandmother sat back in her chair, listening to her children speak about small things that filled their daily lives. She liked hearing about these details, even if she did not always understand them fully. It made her feel close to them. From the other side of the house, the voices of the children drifted in and out. Sometimes there was laughter, sometimes the sound of feet running, sometimes a short argument that ended just as quickly as it started. The grandmother smiled at these sounds. To her, they were signs of life. After a while, one of the grandchildren came back into the kitchen. The child looked around with curious eyes, as if searching for something remembered but not quite clear. "Is the basement still there?" the child asked. The question felt simple, ordinary. The grandmother did not react right away. She lifted her cup and took a small sip of tea before answering. "Yes," she said. "Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be?" The child shrugged. "I remember going down there a long time ago. It was dark, but kind of interesting." Another grandchild appeared behind the first, listening closely. "Is it full of old stuff?" the second one asked. The grandmother nodded. "Boxes mostly. Old furniture. Things I never had the heart to throw away." Her children glanced over briefly but did not seem concerned. One of them smiled. "That basement has been the same forever," they said. "Nothing exciting down there." The grandmother laughed softly. "That's true." The children exchanged looks with each other. Curiosity showed on their faces, the kind that often appears when something feels just a little bit unknown. The grandmother noticed but thought nothing of it. Children were always curious. "Can we go see it?" one of them asked. The grandmother paused for a moment, not because she was worried, but because she was thinking. The basement stairs were old, and the light sometimes flickered. Still, she had gone down there many times herself. It was part of the house, nothing more. "Just be careful," she said calmly. "And don't touch anything sharp." The children smiled, pleased with the answer. They turned and ran off together, their voices echoing down the hallway. The sound of the door opening near the stairs reached the kitchen, followed by the creak of old wood. The grandmother watched them go for a second, then returned her attention to the table. She felt no fear, no doubt. The basement had always been there, quiet and unchanged. It held memories, not danger. Upstairs, life went on as usual. One of her children started talking about a neighbor. Another checked their phone and sighed about work messages. The grandmother listened, nodding now and then. She felt relaxed, surrounded by familiar voices. In her mind, the basement was simple. She remembered carrying boxes down there years ago, sorting through old clothes, holiday decorations, and tools that belonged to her late husband. Dusty shelves, stacked cartons, a faint smell of old wood and concrete. Nothing more. She had never thought of the basement as something worth thinking about. It was just space. Quiet space. Time passed slowly. The grandmother stood up and began clearing the table. She moved plates to the sink and rinsed them gently. As she worked, she could still hear faint sounds from upstairs and occasional laughter from below, though it was harder to tell where it came from. She assumed the children were just exploring, opening boxes, maybe pretending the basement was something exciting. That was how children were. Their imaginations could turn anything into an adventure. She dried her hands and returned to the table. Her children were still talking, now about plans for the coming weeks. The grandmother felt a sense of comfort. Everything felt normal. Safe. Downstairs, the basement light flickered on. The children stepped carefully onto the cool concrete floor. The air felt different down there. Heavier, quieter. Boxes lined the walls, some stacked neatly, others leaning slightly with age. Old blankets covered furniture shapes that had not been used in years. One of the children wrinkled their nose. "It smells old," they said. "Of course it does," another replied. "Everything here is old." They laughed quietly, their voices echoing in the small space. They moved deeper into the basement, touching boxes, reading faded writing on the sides. Holiday items. Old clothes. Broken lamps. Upstairs, the grandmother remained unaware. She poured herself another cup of tea and sat down again. Her thoughts drifted. She looked around the kitchen, noticing small cracks in the wall, the worn edges of the table. She wondered briefly how much longer she would live in this house. The sound of laughter from below faded. The house felt quieter for a moment. The grandmother did not notice. Silence, too, was familiar in this place. She believed her family knew her home as well as she did. She believed there was nothing hidden, nothing waiting to be discovered. To her, the basement was just another room, filled with the past and nothing else. She stayed upstairs, calm and trusting, unaware that a simple question asked without any meaning had quietly changed the direction of the day. The visit still felt normal, ordinary. And that was what made everything else so hard to imagine. The grandmother was sitting quietly at the kitchen table when she first sensed something had changed. It was not a sound, not right away. It was a feeling, a small shift in the air that she could not explain. The house, which had felt warm and full just moments earlier, suddenly felt still. She lifted her head slightly, listening. The voices from downstairs were gone. No laughter. No footsteps. Just silence. At first, she thought nothing of it. Children often grew quiet when they were tired or bored. She wrapped her fingers around her teacup and took a slow sip, letting the warmth settle her nerves. She told herself everything was fine. Then she heard the basement door open. The sound was sharper than before. The creak of the old hinges seemed louder, heavier, as if the house itself had noticed the change too. Footsteps followed, quick, uneven, not playful. The children appeared in the hallway first. The grandmother frowned slightly. Something about them felt wrong. Their faces were pale. The playful color had drained from their cheeks. One of them held onto the railing, gripping it tightly, as if they needed support. Another avoided looking around, keeping their eyes low. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out right away. Before she could ask what was wrong, her adult children rushed in behind them. The change in their expressions struck her even harder. They were tense. Their shoulders were stiff. One of them looked around the room quickly, almost checking the space. Another's face was tight, lips pressed together, eyes wide with something the grandmother had never seen there before. Fear. Her heart skipped. "What happened?" she asked softly. No one answered her at first. One of her sons stepped forward. His movements were quick, almost sharp. He did not sit down. He did not smile. He did not soften his voice the way he always did when speaking to her. "Grandma," he said. The way he said it made her chest tighten. "We're going," he continued. "Now." The word hung in the air. Now. The grandmother stared at him, confused. She laughed lightly, thinking maybe this was some kind of joke. Going where? She asked. You just got here. He did not laugh back. We need to leave, he said again, faster this time. All of us. Her other children exchanged quick looks. One nodded without speaking. Another had already begun moving toward the door, reaching for coats. The grandmother pushed her chair back slowly and stood up. What's wrong? She asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to keep it calm. Did something happen? No one answered her directly. One of the children clung to their parents' side, eyes wide, breathing shallow. Another whispered something under their breath, words the grandmother could not catch. She felt a sudden chill run through her body. This doesn't make sense, she said. What are you talking about? Her son rubbed his face with one hand, as if trying to wake himself up. When he looked at her again, his eyes were filled with urgency. We'll explain later, he said. Right now, we just need to go. Explain what? She asked. What did you see? That question stopped him. For a brief moment, he hesitated. His eyes flicked toward the hallway, then toward the basement door, as if just thinking about it made him uncomfortable. Nothing, he said quickly. Too quickly. It's not important. The grandmother knew then that it was important. She had raised her children. She knew when they were lying, and she knew when they were afraid. This was fear. Raw and unfiltered. Don't talk to me like I'm a child, she said quietly. This is my house. Her words did not slow them down. One of her children picked up their bag and slung it over their shoulder. Another began guiding the kids toward the door, urging them gently but firmly. Put your shoes on, they said. We're leaving. The children obeyed without complaint. That frightened the grandmother even more. They were usually loud, slow, distracted. Now they moved quickly, silently. Please, she said. Someone tell me what's going on. Her son finally looked at her fully. His voice dropped. You don't need to worry, he said. Just trust us. Trust. The word hurt. She had trusted them her whole life. She had trusted them with scraped knees, broken hearts, secrets whispered late at night. And now they were asking her to trust them without explanation. I'm not going anywhere, she said, shaking her head. This is my home. Her son's expression shifted again. The urgency sharpened. Please, he said. Just come with us. Right now. The grandmother looked around the room. The kitchen. The table. The window. Everything looked the same as it had an hour ago. Nothing was broken. Nothing was out of place. And yet, nothing felt the same. Her heart beat faster. She took a step back, away from the door. No, she said softly. Tell me what you found. Silence filled the room. The house seemed to hold its breath. Her children froze, as if unsure how to answer. One of them swallowed hard. Another looked down at the floor. We can't, someone finally said. That answer scared her more than anything else. She had lived in this house for decades. She had walked its halls in the dark. She had cleaned every room. She knew every sound it made. There was nothing here that could frighten them like this. At least, she had believed that. Was it the basement? She asked. No one answered. That was answer enough. Her chest tightened. Her thoughts raced. Memories of the basement filled her mind. Dusty boxes, old tools, holiday decorations, forgotten things. Nothing dangerous. Nothing strange. Someone is overreacting, she said, trying to calm herself. You scared the children. Her son shook his head. We didn't scare them, he said. They were scared before we even got down there. The grandmother felt her knees weaken. The front door opened, letting in a rush of cold air. One of her children held it open, looking back urgently. Please, they said again. We can talk later. The grandmother looked at their faces one more time. These were not people rushing because of a schedule. These were not people being rude or careless. These were people trying to escape. Her mouth felt dry. She took a slow step forward, still unsure, still confused, but shaken enough to follow. As she moved toward the door, she glanced once more down the hallway toward the basement. The door was closed. The house was quiet. And for the first time in her life, the grandmother felt afraid of the place she had always called home. The grandmother stood near the doorway, her hands slightly raised, unsure of what to do with them. Her heart felt heavy, not just with fear, but with confusion and a quiet sting of hurt. She had welcomed her family with warmth, with tea and care, and now they were moving around her as if the house itself had turned dangerous. She looked at their faces, searching for answers. No one met her eyes. "Why are you acting like this?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Did I say something wrong?" No one answered her. One of her children was already helping a grandchild into a jacket, hands shaking slightly as they pulled the zipper up too fast. Another was checking pockets, looking around the room as if afraid of leaving something behind. The grandmother felt a sharp ache in her chest. "Please," she said again. "Talk to me." Her words seemed to float in the air without landing anywhere. Her children kept moving, busy but unfocused, like people trying to escape a bad dream. She noticed small details she would have ignored before. The way one of them avoided looking down the hallway. The way another kept glancing toward the basement door, even though it was closed. The way their breathing was shallow, rushed. This was not anger. This was fear. The realization made her stomach tighten. "You're scaring me," she said softly. That made one of her children pause for just a second. They turned toward her, eyes glassy, lips pressed tight. For a moment, it looked like they might speak. Then they looked away. "We don't have time," they said quietly. "Time for what?" She wanted to ask. Time before what? She took a step forward. "I deserve to know what's happening in my own house." Her voice cracked at the end, and she hated that it did. Her children exchanged quick looks again. One shook their head, almost pleading, as if asking the others not to say anything. The grandmother felt something shift inside her. A memory rose up from years ago, of scraped knees and midnight fevers, of holding these same people when they were scared children. Back then, they had always run to her. Now they were running away. One of the grandchildren tugged on their parent's sleeve. "Can we go now?" the child whispered. That whisper hurt more than any loud word could have. "Yes," the parent replied immediately. "Almost." The grandmother looked at the child's face. The wide eyes. The tight mouth. Children did not pretend fear like that. Her hands began to tremble. "What did you see?" she asked again, more gently this time. Silence. She stepped closer to her son, lowering her voice. "I'm not angry," she said. "I just need to understand." He swallowed hard. She could see his throat move. "It's better if you don't," he said. That answer cut deep. She took a step back, as if struck. Better for who? No reply. The front door was open now. Cold air slipped inside, brushing against her skin. One of her children held it open, standing half outside, eyes fixed on the driveway as if ready to leave at any second. The grandmother suddenly felt very small in her own home. She looked around the room. The coats on the chairs. The cups on the table. Everything felt unfinished, like a moment that had been torn in half. "You're treating me like I did something wrong," she said quietly. Her daughter finally looked at her then. There were tears in her eyes, though none had fallen. "This isn't about you," she said. "Please believe that." The grandmother nodded slowly, though her heart still ached. If it wasn't about her, then it was about something else. Something they could not bring themselves to say. She remembered the basement again. The old steps. The flickering light. The boxes that had sat untouched for years. She had always thought of it as harmless. Now she wasn't so sure. Her children gathered close to the door, forming a tight group around the kids. Their bodies were tense, protective, ready. "I've lived here my whole life," the grandmother said, almost to herself. There's nothing here that should scare you. No one corrected her. That silence felt heavier than any answer. She realized then that whatever they had seen, it had shaken them deeply. Not enough to yell or argue. Enough to flee. Her chest felt tight, her breath shallow. "I won't stop you," she said at last. "But don't shut me out." Her son reached out, touching her arm briefly. His hand was cold. "We'll talk later," he said. "I promise." She wasn't sure if that promise would ever be kept. As they stepped outside one by one, the grandmother remained in the doorway, watching her family leave in a rush she did not understand. The house behind her was silent again. For the first time, she felt like a stranger in the place she knew best. And deep inside, beneath the confusion and hurt, a quiet fear began to grow, because she finally understood one thing clearly. They had not left because they were angry. They had left because they were terrified. The air outside felt colder than it should have. The grandmother stood near the edge of the porch, holding her sweater closed, watching her family gather near the car. Doors were opened and shut. Bags were placed inside quickly, without care. The children were guided into their seats. Seatbelts clicked into place with rushed hands. Everything felt unreal. She stepped down from the porch slowly, her feet heavy against the ground. She still did not fully understand what was happening, only that something had broken without making a sound. "Please," she said again, her voice softer now. "Just tell me." Most of her children avoided her eyes. One pretended to fix something in the car. Another stood with arms crossed, staring at the road. Then one of them, the youngest among the adults, hesitated. They looked back at the house, then at the children in the car, and finally at the grandmother. "Not here," they said quietly. "Not in front of them." The grandmother nodded. She did not argue. They walked a few steps away from the car, just far enough that the children could not hear clearly. The rest of the family stayed close, tense and watchful. The child took a deep breath. It wasn't just boxes, they said. It didn't feel like storage. The grandmother's heart tightened. "What do you mean?" she asked. "There were things," the child continued slowly, choosing each word with care. "Old things. Hidden things. Places that didn't make sense. Like someone didn't want them seen." The grandmother shook her head. "That's impossible. I've been down there so many times." "I know," they said quickly. "I believe you. We all do." Their voice trembled. "But it didn't match what we thought we'd find," they went on. "There were spaces behind things. Boards that looked moved. Items that weren't just old. They felt wrong." The grandmother felt dizzy. She reached for the porch railing to steady herself. "Wrong how?" she whispered. The child closed their eyes briefly. "I don't know how to explain it without sounding strange. It wasn't one thing. It was the feeling. Like the room had been used for something we couldn't understand." Tears filled their eyes. "We didn't want to scare you," they said. "And we're not saying you did anything. Please don't think that." The grandmother looked at their face, seeing fear there, not blame. "Then why leave like that?" she asked. The child glanced toward the car, where the kids sat silently. "Because of them," they said. "Because whatever that was, it didn't belong near them. We couldn't take that risk." The words landed slowly. "You think my house is dangerous," the grandmother said. "No," they replied immediately. "We think something in it might be. And we don't know what." That uncertainty frightened her more than any clear answer could have. "I never noticed anything," she said. "I swear to you." "I know," the child said again, reaching out gently. "That's why this hurts so much." The grandmother felt tears rise in her own eyes. She had lived in that house for decades. She had slept peacefully, believing every room was safe. The idea that something had been hidden from her, even unknowingly, made her feel foolish and exposed. The others approached now, their faces still tight with worry. "We're not accusing you," one of them said firmly. We would never do that. But we can't stay, another added. Not today. The grandmother nodded slowly. She could see now that this decision had not been made lightly. It came from fear, from protection, from love for their children. I understand, she said, though her voice shook. I don't like it, but I understand. They shared a quiet moment then, standing together in the cold air, bound by something none of them could fully explain. The car doors closed. The engine started. Before getting in, the child who had spoken lingered for a second. Please don't go down there alone, they said softly. That warning stayed with her. As the car pulled away, the grandmother remained on the porch, watching until it disappeared down the road. The house behind her loomed larger than it ever had before. She hugged her sweater tighter and turned slowly toward the door. For the first time, she was not sure what waited inside. And for the first time, she wondered if her home held memories she had never truly known. The house felt empty after the car disappeared down the road. The quiet settled in slowly, like dust falling back onto old furniture. The grandmother closed the front door and stood there for a moment, her hand still resting on the handle. The lock clicked into place, louder than usual. She turned and looked around. Everything upstairs appeared the same. The coats on the chairs. The cups on the table. The faint smell of tea in the air. It all looked untouched, frozen in the middle of an ordinary day. And yet, nothing felt ordinary anymore. She walked through the rooms slowly, almost carefully, as if the house might react to her presence. The floorboards creaked under her steps, sounds she had heard thousands of times before. Usually, those sounds comforted her. Now they made her pause. Her thoughts kept returning to the same place. The basement. She tried to push the idea away. She told herself she was tired, that her family had overreacted, that fear could make people imagine things. But the words spoken outside replayed in her mind. Hidden things. Spaces that didn't make sense. She stopped at the top of the basement stairs. The door was closed, just as she had seen it earlier. The handle felt cool under her hand. For a moment, she hesitated. She had gone down these stairs countless times. There was no reason to be afraid. Still, her heart beat faster as she opened the door. The stairs descended into dimness. She reached for the light switch and flipped it. The bulb flickered before settling into a weak, yellow glow. The same light. The same shadows. She took the first step down. The air grew colder with each step. The familiar smell of concrete and dust greeted her, but now it felt heavier, as if it clung to her clothes. She gripped the railing tightly, her knuckles pale. At the bottom, she stopped and looked around. At first glance, nothing had changed. Boxes lined the walls. Old furniture sat under faded sheets. Shelves held jars, tools, and things she had not used in years. This was the basement she knew. And yet, something felt off. She moved closer to one of the shelves and brushed dust from a box. The writing on the side was faint. She leaned in, trying to read it. She did not remember packing this box. That alone unsettled her. She opened it slowly. Inside were items she did not recognize. Old objects, worn but not broken. She picked one up, turning it over in her hands, trying to place it in her memory. Nothing came. She set it back carefully and stepped away. Her eyes drifted to the far corner of the basement, a space she rarely visited. Stacked boxes blocked part of the wall. She stared at them, feeling a strange pull. Why had they been stacked that way? She approached and began moving them aside. The boxes were heavier than she expected. Dust filled the air, making her cough. Behind them, she noticed marks on the wall. Scratches. They were faint, almost hidden beneath layers of old paint. She ran her fingers over them, her skin tingling. They did not look like damage from moving furniture. They were too uneven. Too deliberate. Her stomach tightened. She stepped back, suddenly aware of how quiet the basement was. No hum of appliances. No distant street noise. Just silence. She turned slowly, scanning the room with new eyes. She noticed a small section near the back that looked different. The boards there were newer than the rest. Not by much, but enough that she could tell. She frowned, trying to remember when repairs had been done. She could not. Her breathing grew shallow. She reached out and pressed against the boards. They did not move, but the feeling of them made her uneasy. Why replace part of a wall and not the rest? She stepped away, her heart pounding now. Items she had always thought of as harmless suddenly felt unfamiliar. A chair she could not remember owning. A container sealed tightly with tape she did not recall using. Each detail chipped away at her certainty. She realized then how easily time could smooth over questions. How living with something long enough could make it invisible. She had walked past these things for years without truly seeing them. The basement was not new, but her understanding of it was. She felt a wave of sadness wash over her. Not just fear but regret. Regret that she had assumed familiarity meant safety. Regret that she had trusted routine over awareness. She backed toward the stairs, her eyes never leaving the room. At the bottom step, she paused and looked back one last time. The basement did not look threatening. That was what frightened her most. She climbed the stairs slowly and closed the door behind her. The click of the latch echoed in the quiet house. Upstairs, she leaned against the wall, pressing a hand to her chest. She finally understood what her family had felt. It wasn't about one object or one hidden space. It was about realizing that long-term familiarity can blind someone to things they no longer question. And now that she had begun to see, she knew one thing for certain. Her home was no longer just a place of memories. It was a place of unanswered questions. The days that followed passed slowly. Too slowly. The grandmother woke each morning expecting a call, a message, some sign that things would return to normal. But the phone stayed quiet. The house stayed quiet too. She went through her usual routines. She made tea. She watered the plants. She opened the curtains and closed them again at night. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything felt different. When the phone finally rang, it was brief. A short check-in. A few careful words. Her children asked how she was feeling but avoided anything deeper. When she tried to ask questions, the conversation gently shifted elsewhere. They were distant. Not cold. Not unkind. Just careful. That carefulness hurt more than silence. She spent more time alone with her thoughts than she ever had before. Sitting at the kitchen table, she looked at the walls and wondered how many things she had stopped seeing over the years. Cracks she had ignored. Sounds she had learned to accept. Rooms she rarely entered anymore. The basement door stayed closed. She did not go down again. At night, memories returned uninvited. Moments from decades ago. Conversations she had half forgotten. People who had passed through her life and left without leaving clear explanations behind. She wondered how much of the past she truly remembered and how much she had quietly set aside. She thought about how different each generation was. Her children had grown up in a world that asked questions more freely. They noticed things she had learned to overlook. What she had accepted as normal, they examined. That did not make either of them wrong. It only made the distance clearer. She thought about family stories, the ones told again and again at gatherings, and the ones that were never told at all. Every family had gaps. Moments brushed over. Questions answered with silence. She had never pushed too hard. Life had taught her that some things were better left alone. Now she wasn't so sure. She walked through the house during the afternoons, touching familiar objects as if seeing them for the first time. A cabinet she could not remember buying. A picture frame with a story she no longer recalled. Each item felt like a small reminder of how easily time could blur truth. Her children had always trusted her. She had always trusted them. Yet trust did not mean complete understanding. It never had. She wondered if her children were having the same thoughts. If they were sitting in their own homes, replaying that day, trying to decide what it meant, trying to protect their children from something they could not fully explain. She could not blame them for that. Some evenings, she stood by the window and watched the road, half expecting a familiar car to appear. It never did. The distance between them felt larger than the miles that separated their homes. She realized then that families did not drift apart only because of arguments or anger. Sometimes they drifted because of fear, because of unanswered questions, because of things no one felt ready to name. The basement remained silent beneath her feet. She felt its presence even when she tried not to think about it. It had become a symbol of everything she had assumed she understood. She asked herself hard questions. How well did anyone truly know their own home? How many things did people accept simply because they had always been there? And how much of a family's history stayed hidden, not out of cruelty, but out of habit? The thought unsettled her. She had lived a long life believing familiarity meant safety, that knowing a place for decades meant knowing it fully. Now she understood that time could also create blind spots. Her children's distance no longer felt like rejection. It felt like caution, like people standing back from something they had not yet learned how to face. She hoped in time they would talk, that answers would come slowly, gently, without fear. Until then, she waited. Sitting alone in the quiet house, the grandmother accepted one difficult truth. No matter how long you live somewhere, no matter how deeply you love your family, there are always parts of both that remain unknown. And sometimes, it takes one unsettling moment for those hidden parts to rise to the surface. The house settled into a new kind of silence. Not the peaceful quiet the grandmother had known for years, but something heavier, thoughtful. It followed her from room to room, like a presence that did not speak but was always there. She stopped waiting for the phone to ring. When messages came, they were gentle and brief. A simple question about her health. A short note wishing her a good morning. She replied with the same care. There were no arguments, no sharp words. Just space. At first, that space felt like loss. Then, slowly, she began to understand it. She sat one afternoon in the living room, sunlight stretching across the floor, and thought about fear. Real fear. The kind that tightens your chest and sharpens your choices. The kind that appears when children are involved. She had felt that fear once, long ago, when her own children were small. She remembered how quickly the world could change when their safety felt uncertain. How love became urgent, protective, unreasonable, if needed. That memory softened something inside her. They had not left to hurt her. They had left to protect what mattered most to them. Understanding that did not erase the pain, but it gave it meaning. She no longer replayed the moment they rushed out the door. She no longer searched their faces in her mind, trying to find blame. Instead, she accepted what had been clear all along. Fear changes everything. It changes voices. It changes choices. It changes the shape of love. The basement door remained closed. She passed it every day, sometimes pausing, sometimes not. She did not open it again. Not because she was afraid, but because she did not need to. She already knew enough. The basement was still there, unchanged. But it no longer held the same meaning. It was no longer just a room beneath her feet. It was a reminder. A reminder that familiarity can create comfort, but also blindness. She thought about herself with new eyes. About how certain she had always been. How confident in her understanding of her home, her family, her past. That certainty had once felt like strength. Now she saw it differently. She had not been careless. She had been human. Life moves forward by teaching people what to notice and what to ignore. Over time, the line between the two can blur. What begins as protection can quietly become habit. She accepted that. She also accepted that her children were doing the same thing now, in their own way. Choosing caution. Choosing distance. Choosing what they believed was safest. Love did not always mean closeness. Sometimes it meant stepping back. As the days turned into weeks, the sharp edge of the experience dulled, but it did not disappear. It settled into her like a truth she would carry quietly. She found herself more observant, more aware. She noticed how she listened now, how she questioned gently instead of assuming, how she allowed uncertainty to exist without rushing to explain it away. Her home was still her home. Her family was still her family. But her understanding of both had changed. One evening, she stood at the top of the basement stairs and rested her hand on the wall. She did not turn the handle. She did not need to see anything more. She whispered, not to the house, but to herself, "I understand." The words were not about the basement. They were about everything else. She understood that some truths do not arrive loudly. They reveal themselves through reactions, through silence, through the way people leave instead of stay. She understood that answers are not always necessary for acceptance. And she understood that love, when mixed with fear, often chooses protection over explanation. She turned away from the stairs and walked back into the light of the house. The rooms felt familiar again, but not unchanged. They felt honest. The grandmother carried on with her life, slower now, more thoughtful. She held her family in her heart without demanding closeness. She allowed time to do what it always did best: heal quietly. The basement remained untouched. But she was not the same person who lived above it. And she knew she never would be again.